My daughter-in-law pushed my husband to sell our farm, bragging she'd finally take control. Neither knew I quietly held her parents' mortgage, and the moment I revealed it, the room fell silent as their plans collapsed. I'm Elena, 63, and if you met me, you'd know I smell of earth and grapes most days, preferring mud on my boots to any fancy shoes. My hands, gnarled and strong, tell stories of decades spent coaxing life from the soil, pruning vines under a scorching sun, and harvesting under a sky so vast it makes your heart ache with its beauty. My life is here, on the outskirts of Mendoza, Argentina, on a modest vineyard and farm that has been the beating heart of my existence for longer than I can remember. It's a beautiful place, surrounded by dusty rural roads where the occasional pickup truck kicks up red clouds, the constant symphony of barking dogs echoing across the fields, and neighbors who still believe in trading eggs for favors, a handshake deal stronger than any contract. This farm isn't just land. It's the air I breathe, the purpose in my hands, the rhythm of my days and nights. For years, I was the one who kept it alive, through droughts that cracked the earth like ancient pottery, through economic crises that made every peso a struggle, and through everything else nature and politics threw our way. I remember the sleepless nights during a late frost, wrapped in blankets, watching the smudge pots, praying for the young shoots. I remember the sheer exhaustion of harvest season, but always, that deep, quiet joy of seeing the fruit of our labor. My husband Federico and I built this life together, brick by sun-baked brick, vine by tenacious vine. He always trusted my judgment when it came to the land, or so I thought, his hand warm and steady on my back as we walked the rows together, planning the next season. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a shared love for this earth. Then there's Paula, our daughter-in-law. She's different. Where I see the beauty in a budding vine, the promise of new life emerging from a gnarled branch, she sees the perfect Instagram filter. Her perfectly manicured hands, always spotless, are more accustomed to swiping on a screen than feeling the rough texture of a vine or the dampness of freshly turned soil. Harvest season means hard work and long, back-breaking days to me. To her, it's just a backdrop for rustic chic photos, complete with carefully arranged baskets of grapes and artfully smudged cheeks. Honestly, she's always seemed more concerned with image than with the reality of tending a farm, with the dirt under your nails and the sweat on your brow. She'd visit in her pristine white clothes, carefully avoiding any contact with the actual farm, her nose crinkling slightly at the scent of fermenting grapes or damp earth. In recent years, though, I started to notice a shift, subtle at first, like a barely perceptible change in the wind. Federico, my steadfast husband, the man who once deferred to my knowledge of the land, began listening to Paola more. He started prioritizing her urban visions, her glossy magazine ideals, over the hard-won wisdom gained from decades of working this land. It was just whispers at first, quiet suggestions over Sunday lunch about wasted potential and modernizing, delivered with a casual air but carrying the weight of a decree. I'd catch Federico looking at me differently, a flicker of doubt in his eyes that had never been there before. It felt like a seed of discord, small and insidious, planted right in the heart of our family, in the very soil of our shared life, threatening to choke out everything we'd built. My gut tightened every time Paula spoke of future plans that didn't include the vineyard as it was, or me as its guardian. It was a cold, creeping dread that something precious was being eroded, silently, right under my nose. The whispers grew louder, each one a tiny chip at the foundation of my peace. Paula made no secret of her disdain for what she called our outdated life. It wasn't just words, it was the way her eyes would sweep over the ancient stone walls of the bodega, the way her nose would wrinkle almost imperceptibly at the scent of damp earth after a rain, the almost pitying tilt of her head when she'd watch me prune a particularly stubborn old vine. The farm, in her eyes, wasn't a living legacy, a testament to generations of toil and love, but wasted potential. I'd hear her suggest to Federico, usually over a perfectly arranged platter of cheeses she'd brought from the city, that the property would be perfect for a modern minimalist development. My blood would run cold. Imagine, Federico, she'd purr. We could put in an infinity pool right where that old olive grove is overlooking the sunset, or a boutique hotel experience, Think exposed concrete, sleek lines, nothing rustic at all. Each suggestion felt like a direct assault on my being, stripping away the very soul of what we do here, erasing the calloused hands and aching back that built it. And Federico, my steadfast Federico, to my growing dismay, seemed to be slowly, almost imperceptibly, swayed by her glamorous city dreams. He'd nod, a little too readily, to her visions of modernization, slowly detaching from the reality of the work that sustained us, the very earth that literally fed us. I'd see him looking at the vineyard, not with the familiar pride and understanding, but with a new, speculative gaze, as if seeing it through Paula's eyes for the first time, as a commodity, not a home. It stung, deeply. It felt like a betrayal, quiet and insidious. The hand that used to rest on my shoulder, a silent testament to our partnership, now felt distant, hesitant. The unspoken understanding between us, forged in sun and soil, was fraying. I remember the day Paula, with a smile that was a little too wide, a little too triumphant, announced she'd be taking over my life's work. We were having yerba mate in the shade of the old algarobo tree, the cicadas buzzing loudly in the afternoon heat. She sat there, pristine in white linen, while my hands were still dusty from inspecting a row of syrah vines. "Elena," she started, her voice syrupy sweet. "Federico and I have been talking. You've worked so hard for so long. It's time for you to rest." Rest? My life is this farm. My purpose, my identity, my very breath is tied to these vines, this soil, this endless cycle of growth and harvest. The word rest felt like a euphemism for be gone, for get out of the way. It was a dismissal, a polite erasure. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might be sick. A cold dread seeped into my bones, a terrifying premonition of being rendered obsolete. While I sat there, passing the mate gourd and nodding politely, managing a tight, almost imperceptible smile, my mind was racing at a speed that almost left me breathless. 1,000 thoughts, a million memories, flashed before my eyes. Every sleepless night, every grueling harvest, every drop of sweat, every tiny victory against nature's whims. I smiled, yes, but internally, I was already lining up every paper, every quiet transaction, every carefully hidden secret I'd been keeping for years, tucked away in a worn leather folder in my old office desk. The documents were a whisper of my true power, a silent testament to decisions made long ago, decisions Federico didn't even know about. I knew then, deep in my gut, that a storm was brewing, a tempest that threatened to rip my world apart, and I needed to be ready for it. This wasn't just about a farm anymore. It was about my identity, my purpose, and whether I would let them erase it while I was still very much alive, still breathing, still fighting. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest, pushing out the fear. They wanted a fight? They would get one. The storm finally broke on a seemingly ordinary Sunday, a day usually reserved for peace and the comforting ritual of family. The air was thick with the rich, savory smell of roasted lamb, a scent that usually brought warmth and nostalgia, conjuring memories of countless happy lunches around our big, solid wood table. Sunlight streamed through the open doors, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and highlighting the well-worn grooves in the floorboards. Grooves made by generations walking this very path, carrying platters, chasing children. My grandchildren were playing outside, their happy shrieks a familiar soundtrack to our afternoons, a sound that usually filled my heart. Everything felt normal, deeply familiar, the kind of day you imagine stretching out forever, unchanging. Then Paula arrived. She wasn't alone. She walked in, not with the usual casual greeting, but with a stiff, almost ceremonial air. Her arm linked through a sleek-looking man in a perfectly tailored suit. He looked utterly out of place, like a sharp shard of glass in a warm, rustic painting. His expensive shoes, pristine and city clean, seemed to hover above our worn tiles. His eyes, though polite, scanned our humble home with an almost clinical detachment. A faint, almost imperceptible curl of his lip betraying his true thoughts about our outdated decor and lived-in charm. Paula introduced him, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. a practiced cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge as a potential buyer. My blood ran cold, a sudden icy shock that spread through my veins, making my hands feel strangely numb, as if they no longer belonged to me. I felt the smile on my face tighten, an automatic, practiced movement that felt like a mask. But inside, a knot of dread began to twist, tightening around my chest. I kept my expression neutral, my eyes, I hoped, betraying none of the turmoil swirling within me. Federico, looking profoundly uncomfortable but strangely resolute, just nodded, avoiding my gaze. His usual warmth replaced by a brittle, forced politeness. The air instantly thickened, heavy with unspoken tension. Then, as if presenting a gift or perhaps a trophy, Paula reached into her oversized designer handbag and unfurled a document onto the table, smoothing out the creases with an almost reverent hand. It was a pre-agreement, already signed, or rather initialed by Federico. A signed pre-agreement, already in motion, already a done deal in their minds, without a single word to me, the woman who had nurtured this land for decades, whose hands had literally shaped its destiny, whose every breath was tied to its rhythm. The paper, crisp and official-looking, felt like a slap across the face, a physical manifestation of betrayal that stung more than any open argument. My breath hitched. A silent gasp caught somewhere deep in my chest, a desperate plea for air that wouldn't come. Paula launched into a smug little speech, her voice dripping with a condescension that made my teeth ache, a tone I recognized from her frequent critiques of my old-fashioned ways. She spoke of how times have changed, how the market is ripe for development, and how it was finally time for Federico and her to move to a modern house in the city. She painted a vivid, sickening picture of their future, a sleek, minimalist apartment with panoramic views, opening some rustic chic wine bar, the irony of which almost made me laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that would have choked in my throat, knowing how little she understood the true meaning of rustic, or wine. This wine bar would, of course, be far from the actual dirt and sweat of a real vineyard, a sanitized, marketable version of the life I lived, the life I bled for. And for me, my heart hammered against my ribs as she finally paused, her eyes, sharp and triumphant, locking onto mine across the table. That insufferable smirk played on her lips, a glint of pure victory in her perfectly made-up gaze, and she said, "It's time for you to rest, Elena." The word hung in the air, heavy and loaded, a thinly veiled dismissal, an explicit instruction for me to simply disappear from my own life. My farm, my home, my entire life, my purpose, my very identity, reduced to a transaction for her rustic chic fantasy. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an outright declaration that my life's work was to be erased, my existence shunted aside, like an old broken tool no longer needed, no longer useful. The taste of bile rose in my throat, hot and acrid, as if I had swallowed something poisonous. I felt a tremor run through my body, a furious, primal response to being so carelessly discarded, so utterly dismissed by the very people I called family. My vision blurred for a split second, a wave of dizzying anger threatening to overwhelm me. I felt a crushing weight in my chest, a desperate, suffocating anger that warred with a terrifying sense of helplessness. My hands, still tingling from the initial shock, clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms so hard it left crescent moon marks. I forced myself to breathe, a shallow, controlled intake of air, but the image of her smirk, the dismissive wave of her hand towards my life, branded itself into my mind, a permanent scar. I was not going to be rested. Not now, not ever. When Paula looked at me and delivered that line about finding something simple for me in the city, like I was a stray dog they planned to park in a corner, or an old chipped piece of furniture to be relegated to an attic, it was like a match striking dry kindling, igniting a bonfire in my chest. Anger tasted metallic in my mouth, hot and acrid, burning and bitter, a poison that spread through my veins, making my scalp prickle. My vision swam for a second, a dizzying rush of blood to my head, and I felt the muscles in my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. They were erasing my entire life, my legacy, the very essence of who I was, while I was still sitting at the table, smiling and passing the salt as if nothing was wrong. It was a grotesque pantomime, and I was the unwilling star. Every drop of sweat, every sleepless night, every sacrifice for this land, dismissed with a condescending promise of something simple. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless, not from shock, but from a rage so profound it felt like a physical entity coiling in my gut. But beneath the anger, a cold, sickening fear began to spread, an icy tendril wrapping around my heart. It wasn't just about the land, the property value, or the grapes. If they sold the farm, I wouldn't just lose dirt and vines. I'd lose the only thing that gave me purpose, the only thing that had rooted me to this earth for over 6 decades. I'd lose the rhythm of my days, the calluses on my hands, the taste of sun-warmed fruit, the quiet satisfaction of watching something grow under my care. It was a visceral, gut-wrenching dread, the terrifying realization that I would become a ghost in my own life, a shadow without a place to stand. My breath caught in my throat, a silent, desperate cry. What would I be without this farm? Just Elena, an old woman without a purpose, without a home, without a legacy. The thought was unbearable, a black pit opening up beneath my feet. Part of me, the raw, primal part, wanted to scream, to lash out, to grab that pristine pre-agreement Paula had so smugly unfurled and rip it into 1,000 pieces right then and there. I wanted to overturn the table, to shatter the illusion of our polite Sunday lunch, to force them to see the devastation they were unleashing. I imagined the satisfaction of wiping that insufferable smirk right off Paula's face with a well-aimed slap, or perhaps just a torrent of the unvarnished truth. But another, colder, more calculating part of me, honed by years of surviving droughts and economic downturns, whispered for restraint. It wanted to see just how far they'd go, how blind they were in their self-importance, how utterly oblivious they were to the quiet power I truly held, without knowing what I truly held in my hand, tucked away in my office. I wanted them to overreach, to dig their own hole deeper. That moment, when she belittled my entire existence with that condescending promise of something simple, was my breaking point. It was the final straw, the spark that ignited the quiet fury I'd been carefully banking for weeks. I decided then and there, with a chilling clarity that surprised even myself, that she would regret every single word, every dismissive glance, every smug assumption. I would make her rue the day she ever thought she could erase me. My hands, still clenched tight under the table, felt like they were vibrating with suppressed energy, a silent promise of retribution. I forced a smile onto my face, a tight, thin line that felt like it was carved from ice, and pushed back my chair with a deliberate, almost imperceptible scrape against the floor. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, my voice quiet, steady, almost eerily calm, belying the storm raging inside me. I made eye contact with Federico for a split second, a look that I hoped conveyed both my pain and my unwavering resolve, but he quickly looked away, his face pale and etched with discomfort. Paula, still basking in her triumph, barely registered my departure. I walked slowly, deliberately, out of the dining room, my back ramrod straight, my boots making soft thuds on the familiar tiles, each step a testament to my control. My heart was pounding like a drum against my ribs, but my outward demeanor was one of serene composure. The moment I reached the sanctuary of my small, dusty office, the door clicked shut behind me, plunging me into a blessed, albeit temporary, silence. I leaned against the door for a moment, closing my eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath, trying to steady the earthquake within me. My hands were still trembling. I walked to my old wooden desk, its surface worn smooth by years of use, and pulled out the bottom right drawer. Buried beneath old ledgers and a handful of dried lavender, I found it. A worn leather folder, its edges softened with age, its contents a secret I had held close for years. Inside were the documents, crisp and official for a quiet, long-held secret, the mortgage assignment for Paula's parents' home. It was a safety net I had put in place years ago, a silent favor to them when they were in financial trouble, a gesture of goodwill that no one but their lawyer and mine knew about. Now it was a weapon. I picked up the phone, my fingers surprisingly steady as I dialed my lawyer's number. "It's Elena," I said, my voice firm, devoid of any tremor. "It's time for my rest to begin." The next family meeting about the sale wasn't held over a comforting Sunday lunch. Oh no, it was a formal affair, set for the following week in our rarely used formal living room. The air was thick with a brittle kind of politeness, a veneer so thin you could practically see the tension vibrating beneath it. The heavy curtains were drawn, making the afternoon light feel muted, almost solemn. Paola arrived again with her sleek potential buyer, whose tailored suit seemed even more out of place against our heirloom furniture this time. Federico was there, looking like a man caught between two cliffs, his shoulders hunched. My lawyer, a stern, quiet woman named Dr. Sofia Ramirez, sat beside me, her presence a silent declaration that this was no longer just a family discussion. I knew I couldn't just burst in guns blazing. Federico would defend Paola out of pride, and it would immediately devolve into a messy, screaming family feud. Exactly what I wanted to avoid. I needed precision, like a surgeon's cut. The timing and the tone had to be absolutely perfect. Calm enough that no one could accuse me of acting out of spite, but clear enough that everyone understood precisely what I truly controlled. My heart beat a steady, heavy rhythm in my chest, a drumbeat of anticipation and cold resolve. My hands resting in my lap were steady, but inside, my stomach churned with a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head since that Sunday. Every word, every gesture. The meeting began with Paola, radiating smug confidence, clearly believing she had already won. She sat straighter than anyone else, her eyes gleaming with triumph. She held a stack of glossy brochures depicting sleek, minimalist structures that looked nothing like our farm, nothing like home. She started talking about renovations, about investors, about her vision for the future, her voice lilting with an almost theatrical enthusiasm. She spoke of rebranding the vineyard, of elevating the experience, completely ignoring my presence at the table as if I were already a ghost. She gestured grandly with her perfectly manicured hands, painting a picture of a future that had no place for mud on boots or the scent of fermenting grapes. Federico shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze fixed on the ornate pattern of the rug, avoiding my eyes entirely. The buyer, a man named Leandro with an unnervingly smooth smile, nodded along, occasionally interjecting with technical terms about ROI and market positioning. This was my cue. As she was mid-sentence outlining some extravagant plan for a new tasting room to be built where my grandmother's rose garden still bloomed, I gently, almost delicately, laid the worn leather folder containing the mortgage documents on the polished mahogany table. The papers rustled softly as I pushed them towards her, the sound shockingly loud in the room, cutting through Paola's confident monologue. Her voice faltered, then died completely. Everyone's eyes, drawn by the sound, fixed on the folder. "Paola," I said, my voice quiet but firm, a low hum that somehow commanded attention more effectively than any shout. I looked her directly in the eye. Her triumphant smile had frozen on her face, a grotesque mask. "Before we finalize anything, I should probably mention the 3 missed payments your parents have. To me." The room fell silent. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. The cicadas outside, which had been buzzing relentlessly, seemed to stop. The heavy silence pressed down, thick and suffocating. Paola's eyes darted from the documents to me, then back to the folder, her face draining of all color, turning a sickly pale gray like dough. Her jaw dropped, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it spoke volumes. Her perfectly coiffed hair, her designer clothes, suddenly seemed to shrink her, making her look small and vulnerable. My lawyer, Dr. Ramirez, then stepped in, her voice calm and authoritative, explaining the legal ramifications. She spoke of mortgage assignments, of overdue payments, of the clauses that allowed for foreclosure proceedings to begin. Her words, crisp and professional, landed like blows. I simply added, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel. "If our farm, my home, is no longer part of their future, then I see no reason to continue being part of theirs either." I watched Paola's face, seeing the slow, dawning horror as she realized the full extent of what I was saying. I explained, in plain, unambiguous terms, that I could legally begin foreclosure proceedings on her parents' home the very next month. Unless, of course, the sale of my farm was canceled immediately, and any attempt to remove me from decisions or from my home stopped. Leandro, the potential buyer, who had been sitting awkwardly, looking utterly bewildered, slowly pushed his chair back, a faint murmur of, "I think I should go," escaping his lips. Paola's jaw dropped further, if that was even possible, and Federico's hands, which had been clasped tightly on his lap, began to shake violently. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with shock and a profound, dawning understanding. The full weight of my quiet power, my long-held secret, crashed down around him. He finally understood that I had been the silent backbone, not just of our family, but of hers too, and that I held the threads of so many lives in my calloused hands. The air was thick with unspoken words, with shattered plans, and with the undeniable reality of a power shift so complete it was almost dizzying. The silence that followed was deafening, a thick, palpable void where Paola's smug chatter had been just moments before. It wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that screams, echoing with shattered expectations and the abrupt collapse of carefully constructed plans. Leandro, the potential buyer, looked like a deer caught in headlights. His smooth smile finally wiped clean off his face. He mumbled something about unexpected complications and needing to consult my principals, before practically tripping over himself in his haste to escape the oppressive atmosphere, his expensive city shoes scuffing our antique rug on his way out. He couldn't get out fast enough, and frankly, I didn't blame him. In that moment, watching Paola's perfectly made-up face crumple like a discarded piece of paper, seeing the dawning horror and fear in her eyes, and feeling the sheer, profound shock radiating from Federico, a part of me felt a cold, hard satisfaction. It was a visceral, almost primal triumph. They thought I was just an old woman clinging desperately to a plot of land, a relic to be moved aside, a sentimental obstacle easily bypassed. They forgot that the person who seems easiest to overlook is often the one who's been quietly, tirelessly holding everything up, the invisible scaffolding. And the person who holds everything up can just as easily let it all fall, watching it crash around them. I saw the realization hit them, a sickening blow that knocked the air out of their self-assured lungs. I wasn't just a part of the landscape. I was the foundation, and without me, everything they held dear, everything they took for granted, could crumble. The power in that realization was intoxicating, a bittersweet rush of adrenaline that left my hands tingling and a strange, almost metallic taste in my mouth. But now, as the immediate dust settles and the furious energy that propelled me through that confrontation begins to recede, leaving behind an unsettling quiet, I can't help but reflect. The satisfying thud of the folder on the table, the sharp intake of breath from Paola, the way Federico's face drained of blood, it all replays in my mind, a slow-motion reel of destruction. Was it too much? Did I go too far by revealing such a profound, deeply personal secret, by leveraging such a sensitive issue as her parents' home, their security? The thought feels like a heavy stone in my gut, a counterweight to the initial triumph. It felt like the only way to make them truly understand the depth of my commitment to this farm, to make them see that I am not just an accessory to their plans, not a mere piece of furniture to be rearranged. I needed them to know that I had agency, that I had power, and that I would defend what is mine, what is our family's legacy, with everything I had. My connection to this land isn't just financial, it's spiritual. It's my very soul woven into the earth. They were trying to rip a part of me out, to sever me from my roots, and I fought back with the only weapon I felt they would truly understand, their own vulnerability. But the way I did it was ruthless. It was a cold, calculated move, planned in the depths of my quiet fury, executed with chilling precision. It shocked them to their core, yes, but it also exposed a hidden vulnerability that I had, until now, chosen to protect out of a sense of family loyalty. I saw the fear in Paola's eyes, a raw, naked fear that I had never intended to inflict on anyone, especially not someone connected to my family. And Federico, his face, etched with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and a dawning understanding of just how much I had been shouldering silently, haunts me. He looked at me as if he was seeing a stranger, a side of his wife he had never known existed. And perhaps, in that moment, he was right. I became someone I didn't entirely recognize, driven by a desperate need to survive. Did I damage something deeper than just a business arrangement? Did I irrevocably scar our family relationships? The silence between us now, even after the initial shock, is thick with unspoken accusations, with the weight of that revealed secret. It's a silence that feels colder, heavier than any argument, because it's a silence born of fear and a profound shift in power dynamics. I wanted to protect my home, my life, but at what cost? I look at my gnarled hands, the same hands that nurture the vines, and wonder if they have now become capable of tearing down instead of building up. The satisfaction is still there. Yes, a faint ember, but it's now mingled with a disquieting uncertainty, a gnawing doubt that leaves a bitter aftertaste. I protected my farm, but did I lose a piece of myself in the process? Did I become the monster they thought I was? The ruthless, calculating old woman they wanted to dismiss? The result of that meeting was immediate and undeniable. The silence shattered not long after Leandro, the buyer, fled, but not with shouts, rather with a quiet, devastating collapse. Federico, his face still pale and etched with a mixture of shame and shock, looking utterly lost, slowly, almost reverently, reached for the pre-agreement. His hands, which moments before had been shaking with fear, now moved with a deliberate, almost ritualistic slowness. He didn't just crumple it, he ripped it, with a slow, deliberate tear that sounded like fabric tearing, then another and another, the crisp paper yielding with a soft zip until the official-looking documents were in jagged, irreparable pieces scattered across the polished mahogany table. It wasn't an act of anger, but of a broken man trying to mend a colossal mistake, a desperate attempt to undo what had been set in motion. He didn't say a single word, just looked at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite decipher. A profound regret, perhaps, or a newfound, unsettling fear. Later that week, without Paula present, he quietly signed an updated deed, giving me majority control of the farm. For security, he murmured, avoiding my gaze, his voice barely a whisper, but it was a tacit, undeniable acknowledgement of my true value, my power, and his own profound misjudgment. The words weren't necessary. The heavy scrape of the pen on the legal document spoke volumes louder than any apology he could have offered. It felt like a heavy weight being lifted from my shoulders. Yes, but also like a new, different kind of weight settling in its place, a weight of responsibility and isolation. Paula, once so smug and dismissive, is now remarkably respectful, almost meek, around me. Her usual confident stride has been replaced by a tentative shuffle, her designer heels no longer clip-clopping boldly across the tiles, but moving cautiously, as if treading on thin ice. Her voice, once so boisterous with her visions and grand plans, is now softer, almost hesitant, tinged with an unnerving politeness. She still visits, mostly out of obligation, bringing store-bought pastries instead of her usual gourmet cheeses, but the visits are shorter, filled with awkward, heavy silences where once there was her incessant, self-important chatter. Her rustic chic dreams have been put on indefinite hold, vanishing like smoke into the Mendoza air, and for now, the vineyard is safe. I still catch her looking at me sometimes, her eyes darting away quickly if I meet her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable there, resentment, perhaps, or a grudging, unsettling respect born of fear. It's a hollow victory, in some ways. The battle for the farm was won decisively, yes, but the easy, comfortable warmth that once permeated our family gatherings has been replaced by a brittle politeness, a constant undercurrent of unspoken tension that hums just beneath the surface. The clinking of glasses now feels sharper, the laughter a little too forced, a little too loud, trying to cover the vast, quiet chasm that has opened between us. Paula's parents never found out how close they came to losing their home. I chose not to reveal it. That wasn't my intention, to destroy their lives or cause them undue suffering, only to protect mine. But Paula did, and that for me was enough. The knowledge is a silent leash, an invisible collar, keeping her in check, a constant chilling reminder of the delicate balance she almost upset, and the quiet, potent power I wield. The farm continues, just as it always has. The sun still rises over the Mendoza Mountains, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, and my boots are still covered in the rich, dark mud that is the lifeblood of this place. The air is still filled with the scent of ripening grapes, of damp earth after a morning dew, of the promise of another harvest. I am back at its helm, where I belong, my gnarled hands once again guiding the rhythm of the land, feeling the familiar hum of life beneath my fingertips. But there's a new tension in the air, a quiet, almost suffocating understanding that I am not to be underestimated. It's a palpable shift, like the pressure change before a storm, even when the sky is clear and the sun is shining. Federico looks at me differently now, with a new deference, sometimes with a flicker of sadness in his eyes. A ghost of the man who once trusted me implicitly, but always, always, with an undeniable respect that wasn't truly there before. He knows now, truly knows what I am capable of and what I have been silently carrying for all these years. The farm is secure, my legacy protected, but the cost feels heavy, like a stone in my heart. The relationships, once fluid and easy, once built on an unspoken foundation of love and trust, are now rigid, encased in a fragile shell of forced civility. I am the matriarch, the protector, yes, but I am also perhaps something more distant, more feared. I see it in their eyes, a guardedness that wasn't there before. So, Reddit, I need to know. Am I the asshole for using such a potent, deeply personal secret to protect my farm and my life's work? Did I go too far? By leveraging her parents' home? By holding that over Paula's head? Or was this the only way, the only language they would understand, to make them truly see my value and stop them from erasing my existence? From turning my entire life into a rustic chic fantasy they could sell off without a second thought? The silence around me now, in my once vibrant home, is deafening, and I'm left wondering if I secured my home, but lost my family in the process.